Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. You can get the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Geoff Mosher is here today, and we got a lot to discuss as the Eagles, who makes the cut based on what we saw. 3 preseason games, Geoff Mosher. I don't know that you took a whole heck of a lot from Saturday, but if you did, was there anything Saturday? Did somebody make the team? Did somebody have a good enough day to make the final, as you mentioned on Thursday show, the final 69?
Yeah, Mike, happy Monday to you. Hope you're doing well. It's finally time to move on from preseason and training camp and really get into the nitty-gritty here with the 53-man roster, and then we'll get into the season, which I'm sure we're all excited about. Obviously a lot of these roster decisions are made before the preseason game. Guys are just putting out there trying to put good tape on at that point to see if they don't make the team, can they, latch on somewhere else. But I think the 2 significant takeaways from the game, some more than other. One is that Cooper DeJean was finally able to get some action in there, and you saw that he played at nickel spot. That's where he's been practicing. Wasn't maybe the plan when they drafted him right away. They drafted him as an outside corner, but obviously the need is there. They've been practicing Quinyon Mitchell there for most of camp while Cooper DeJean was hurt, but they are trying to get Cooper DeJean up to speed, and the quickest way to get him on the field is at nickel. And you've heard Vic Fangio say that ideally you want Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, and they just don't know if that's ideal yet because they don't know how quickly Cooper DeJean can adjust to playing the nickel spot. I thought in coverage he was a little bit knocking the cobwebs off, but as far as run defense and run fits and knowing where to be from that nickel spot, I thought Cooper DeJean looked pretty good. And then the other significant takeaway, I think that's probably been discussed on your show and elsewhere, is when you see Nolan Smith playing in the final preseason game while a lot of key reserves are not. And then secondly, he kind of looked like a person who should be playing in a 3rd preseason game. He didn't really jump out or stand out a whole lot. That might be a cause of concern. I try not to make too much about camp or preseason, but certainly have to read between the lines on certain things. And the coaches felt that he needed to be out there and getting more reps.
Yeah, I was going to say Cooper DeJean, I was telling a funny story in the 3 o'clock hour. The first play, he gets illegal contact, the interception, it gets called back, and then they go pick on him in the end zone there. And I'm out at a restaurant, and the kid watching the game turns around and looks at me and goes, "They might have wasted a pick on this guy." As if like those 2 plays defined like the draft pick there. But that's just like how people were invested in this game. But overall, I agree with what you said. Yeah, he had a couple of rough spots, but up against the run. But I do want to ask you, he's playing in the slot there, and you're going to get matched up with smaller, quicker guys. Like, that seems to be, like, I think you guys all chronicled, he had a tough day against, Britton Covey in the slot. These smaller, quicker guys, how he's going to match up in those moments.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about size or even skill level as much as just getting him the reps there. It's been a long time. He's been hurt twice since the end of the college season, right? He had to have his pro day delayed while he rehabbed from one injury. And then, of course, the hamstring put him out for a while. So he's really got to get himself up to speed. And then once he does get himself up to speed, Mike, to your point, he does have to prove that he's a competent player at that position, which I don't think will be as much of an issue, but I don't know. This is why Quinyon Mitchell has played nickelback all camp and why Isaiah Rodgers has played outside corner, because that's most likely going to be your package, against the Packers if DeJean's just still not ready there, right? That's going to be your nickel package.
Yeah, and you look at what Cooper DeJean, brings to the table. He's got a lot of size and athleticism, but that quickness in the slot there, that could be a spot where teams kind of try to exploit. We did see the Vikings, which, by the way, you're not defending Justin Jefferson, for God's sakes, there, and he had some issues. He's just a long guy, right? I mean, do you look at Cooper DeJean and say slot guy?
I do. Well, he's not. It's not like he's 6'2". I mean, I think he did play slot at Iowa. He didn't play safety at Iowa, but he played inside and outside at Iowa.
He played all over the place.
Yeah, he did play. I don't think he played safety though. People have projected him there, but he may have like kind of roamed around.
No, but they had him. They had a name for his position, and he was one of these guys that was like, up on the line. It was almost like a Troy Polamalu, like where he's up on the line. Joker. He played the Joker position.
Right. So, and Jalen Ramsey has played the star position, which is also a nickname that people have used for that versatile back. But he's 6'1", 198. He should be okay in the slot because he has good athleticism. But to your point, and I'll say this about him and Quinyon Mitchell, no matter how good they look in the preseason, no matter how good they look in training camp, cornerback is one of the toughest positions to just immediately play well at in the NFL, especially if you don't come from a huge school like Quinyon Mitchell and you don't play a lot of press man, or if you do come from a good defensive big Power 5 school like Iowa, but you are a Swiss Army knife and you just haven't played against a whole lot of NFL receivers, especially on the inside. So no matter how good or bad these guys look, like, in the season opener, when you're up against a pretty elite play caller in the Packers head coach, Matt LaFleur, and they've got a bunch of good weapons from Jaden Reed to Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Musgrave, this is going to be an area where the receivers are going to win some because the two guys that we're talking about, as good as they might be, Mike, they're inexperienced. They've never played NFL snaps, and there's a nuance that comes with the position that they just haven't been able to show yet.
Yeah. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. Football at 4. Nolan Smith, you talked about him, and he said he played, and then he looked like a guy who should have been playing. Does that alter your thoughts on how he might get used, seeing that he had to play, and somebody has to play, but the fact that it was him, and then you said, he didn't really, stand out in those moments. Should we temper because, look, this guy was a first-round pick, man.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when you go into the season, right, and you do what are my biggest storylines about the Philadelphia Eagles entering this season? We do that every year, right, especially on the first week. Usually pass rush is not one, meaning not a storyline as far as a concern. Because not only do you have good pass rushers in the past, right, you also kind of got a sense very easily of what the four-man rush is going to look like. And that's the most important part of the pass rush because the Eagles just don't blitz a lot, and Vic Fangio the same way. So I go into this saying I think Bryce Huff is part of the four-man rush and Jalen Carter part of the four-man rush, and I assume Josh Sweat will be part of the four-man rush, at least to start off with. But who's that fourth guy? Is it another D tackle like Moro Ajomo, or is it Brandon Graham moving inside, or is it Nolan Smith on the outside kicking Josh Sweat inside? I don't know. Yeah. Is Jalix Hunt going to get more reps in the first early weeks than maybe we thought when they drafted him and considered him a project? Possibly. So I think it's much more of and I'm not calling it a red flag or a concern because the Eagles always figure out a way to have some pretty good pass rushes. But in the defense that they're playing, you need a really good pass rush because, again, you're only rushing with 75% of the time, right? Yeah. And I feel less certain about what that four-man rush is this year than ever.
Yeah. So the other guy, we were talking about this last hour. If there's a name that's a surprise, Bradbury or Maddox, those two guys to me would be the surprises. I mean, if Bradbury didn't play, he was asked straight out, what is his future on the team? And he said, obviously, we like James, had some good moments here and had some really good. He's been a great teammate. He's made some plays. I'm excited, the versatility that he has. But Bradbury not playing, they got to the point where if somebody got hurt playing safety, that James Bradbury would be playing safety on this team. Are we feeling that? And Avonte Maddox. Or are one of those two guys in some danger here?
Well, Andre Sam, as Andrew DeCecco reported recently, was waived. Or will be waived. And so he'll probably be back on the practice squad. I kind of thought Andre Sam might make the 53 with Tristan McCullum and not Avonte Maddox because I thought Maddox would be a guy that they could easily move on from but then bring back on the practice squad. But I would say with Andre Sam being waived, that increased the chance of Maddox being kept on the 53. And I would imagine, Mike, that he would be the third safety if he's on the 53. I don't know what's going to happen with Bradbury. He obviously has a contract issue that makes him tough to trade, but not impossible. And I'm not enough of a contract master to understand if they can trade him in a way that the acquiring team does not take on maybe the option bonus that's big. Like if the Eagles can pay that first, so that makes the contract a lot more tradable. So there's a part of me that believes James Bradbury might make the initial 53 if they can't make a deal, but then before the season opener, get something redone with his contract to make it easier to move him. I can't see him on the 53 this year in any capacity.
It's a weird one, man. What is the deal with? I know veterans can be on the practice squad, but like, all right, if you try to put James Bradbury on the practice squad, is someone going to try to scoop him up immediately, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, to do that, you have to release him, and then he becomes available for any team to pick up. But then you have to foot the bill for all the guaranteed money in his contract. So I think if you're Howie Roseman, at very least, knowing that there's always a demand for cornerbacks, and maybe not even starting cornerbacks, but guys who can come in and supply depth, you're at least trying to see if someone will give you a 6. Right? Or a conditional 6 that could become a 5 if a guy winds up playing a certain amount of snaps before you're just saying goodbye, eating all that money, and then trying to bring him back on the practice squad. And I'm not even sure that they would do that.
Right.
Maddox,
same situation, right? Can you try to sneak him through practice squad? I only ask this because
I wouldn't even call that sneaking because, there's nickel corners or a dime a dozen. He's got a history. The Eagles let him go out and test free agency, and he obviously came back about a month later after not obviously getting either a way better offer.
All right. Because they have all those corners that they like. Job, Ricks, the guys. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Ringo, and I would imagine they want to try to figure out a puzzle piece to get them all here, but you might not be able to keep all of them. But if you put any of those guys on the practice squad, they get scooped up.
Yeah, they could be. And Ricks would be a guy who put out, 300 snaps on defense last year, and I could see the Eagles, losing him to the waiver. But I mean, you're going to keep about 5 or 6 corners, and between Mitchell, DeJean, Rogers, Ringo. And who am I missing there? Cooper, DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Rogers, Ringo. I feel like I'm missing a 5th obvious one. You're probably not going to keep too many more than that. So, I think all those guys we mentioned, Job, who didn't have a really good camp, by the way, Ricks. Oh, Slay. Duh. How do I miss the starting corner? Slay, Mitchell, Rogers, Cooper, and Cooper, DeJean, and Ringo is 5 right there. I don't think they can go any heavier than that.
Let me go to linebacker, okay? I want to get your thoughts on this situation. This one's interesting because I think they have 5 guys they like. But what if there was somebody available they thought was better than the 5 they have? It's like they don't want to give up on any of the 5 they have, but what if they were able to upgrade over the 5 that, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, this guy's released and he would come in and play right away, but we don't want to cut Van Sumerman. We don't want to cut, Bond. We don't want to cut Dean. Like, it's a weird spot where they don't have – like a Pro Bowl number 1 starter, but they also like the 5 they have to where they don't want to bring anyone in who actually might be better than the guys they have.
Yeah, and honestly, if you asked me a third takeaway on the preseason game, I would tell you that Oren Burks looked like a guy who shouldn't have been playing in that game. Oren Burks, who missed almost all of camp with an injury and really didn't do much, was in that game looking like, Brian Urlacher because he's playing with a bunch of 3rd and 4th stringers who aren't going to be on NFL rosters. He's clearly a veteran linebacker who knows how to play the position. And, Mike, it might have helped him. It might have helped the Eagles that he missed so much of camp because to keep those 5 that you just mentioned, you would have to release or waive Burks. Well, he's a vested veteran. I think you release Burks and hope nobody signs him and then try to bring him back to your practice squad because he would be the guy that could be an upgrade over those guys because he's just played more. He's not a great linebacker, but he has played in a really good system in San Francisco, and he showed you he can still got juice left in that game.
There's going to be cuts all over the league, and if Howie's searching for the waiver wire, we just kind of talked about. They like their corners. They seem to like a lot of these linebackers, but if they're bringing guys in off the waiver wire from other organizations, what positions are they playing?
Maybe tight end.
All right.
Possibly. I mean, only if there's an offensive lineman that they really like. They certainly have enough that they're going to have to figure out a way to trim. But it's possible someone they have graded higher than maybe like a Nick Gates or a Darian Kennard. You always just look for them on offensive line and defensive line. But, tight end would be the spot that I would think. And safety, of course, would be a spot where if they could do better number three than Avonte Maddox, I imagine that would be, somewhere that they would look.
Yeah, I think that'll be something interesting. Like wide receiver, you brought in the trade with Dotson, but I got to imagine that they're not thrilled with 4, 5, 6. But that's the weird spot when you have two rookies at that spot because you're not cutting the rookies.
Correct. You usually don't cut your rookies. We actually talked about that on the podcast that dropped this morning. There have been 6 rookies in the Howie Roseman era. Well, since he regained power after the Chip Kelly thing, there have been 6 rookies that he did cut. Alex McAllister, Clayton Thorson,
this is good research right here, right?
Yeah.
Who tracked this one?
This one I'm going to give to Kaplan. He did this one.
He had the list of the 5 rookies that did not make the team. 6 rookies. So only 6 rookies got cut?
Yes.
Wow.
Would you like to hear them?
Yeah.
Alex
McAllister was a defensive end, right?
Yep. Clayton Thorson. We remember
quarterback.
That. Yep. Casey Toohill.
Defensive end. He plays for Washington.
Yeah, he was the only one that actually wound up sticking. Blake Countess.
Blake Countess was a safety, was a punt returner with the Rams, right?
Correct. Prince Tega Wanago.
Yeah, he was an Auburn offensive lineman.
Yep, offensive tackle, right? He's been with the Chiefs on their practice squad. And Jacoby Stevens.
Jacoby Stevens, he was a safety from LSU that they were going to try to masquerade as a linebacker.
You got it.
How's my knowledge here for you?
That's great. Nice pulls by you. So that
those are some deep there's some deep cuts right there.
There are. That's right. So when you look at a guy like, I don't think they're gonna. I know Clayton Thorson was the highest of all that was cut. He was a 4th rounder or 5th rounder that they cut. I don't think they're going to cut any 5th rounder. Like Anaya Smith is their 5th rounder. I know there are some reports out now that he's got a hamstring injury and that he's dealing with. So we'll see what that means for his roster spot. He could go on IR. I don't know.
You get how many pups can you use? 1, 2?
I believe 2, if I'm not mistaken.
And Sidney Brown's going to be a pup?
Yeah, well, and so should Caden Stearns. Or no, Caden Stearns might be IR. In fact, that would be different. But either way, maybe Dylan McMahon, the 6th-round center, who this guy's barely 300 pounds. Maybe he's one that gets cut. I don't think they're going to cut Johnny Wilson. So we'll see. You're right. They're going to probably keep all, if not 95% of the rookies that they drafted this year.
Well, it's that time of the year, right, where names that people recognize are getting, like Russell Gage just got released. Oh, wide receiver, you got to pick. Like Boston Scott, did you get any Boston Scott? Why don't they bring him back?
Yeah, no, see, Russell Gage is interesting. Now, he had a major injury, if I'm not mistaken, that he's coming back from. But I'm curious to see what kind of receivers become available. Obviously, Sterling Shepard was cut, but he's also a little bit long in the tooth and injury prone. Because the only sort of counter, that I take some abuse from some, diehard Eagles fans on YouTube that can only see things one way. But I said I thought a 3rd-round pick was a little steep for an underwhelming first-round pick in Jahan Dotson, and I think about all the players that the Eagles have traded for that were disappointing elsewhere and came to the Eagles, and people thought they were going to be like a GGB, or you could probably find a couple other people that you thought that they were going to get resurrected because they became Eagles, and it just didn't happen. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be some decent receivers that they could have signed here to be their number 3, 4 slot like Jahan Dotson will be, instead of giving up a 3rd-round pick.
Real quick, by the way, so Anaya Smith reported discomfort in his ankle and hamstring. He's getting an MRI. His availability for the start of the season is in some doubt. So, as you just kind of talked about there, that was reported about 15 minutes ago for Anaya Smith. So it would imagine, hey, you're not going to be on the starting. We're not going to have you on the 53 to start the season. You'll be pupped or IR'd or something, and we'll move on from there. Because I can't imagine he has a role in this offense off the jump, right?
I cannot imagine he would have a role in the offense unless he was a punt returner. But obviously with Britton Covey on the team, that's not going to be the case.
What happens?
Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to be released. There's going to be a decent number of functional receivers who I thought could have been the 3-4 for the Eagles here. That'll be available.
Yeah, you got and then Paris Campbell, John Ross. Are they gonna? What's the deal with those two?
I mean, it's because of the situation with Anais Smith that might open up the door for Campbell to now make the team as the sixth receiver. We'll see. It all depends on what protocol they
He
go through
went
with
from
Anais.
your third guy to your sixth guy.
He went from third to being to your seventh, right, after they acquired Dotson, because then you got Smith, Miller, and Covey, and now he might go back to be the fourth.
Crazy.
That tells you everything about Eagles receiver depth that you need to know.
Well, keep your eye on the waiver wire then.
I will do that.
Yeah. All right, Geoff
Sure,
Mosher,
yeah.
the Inside the Birds podcast, the latest one with all the roster decisions tomorrow, by the way. They'll have plenty on that. Football at 4 tomorrow. And Adam Kaplan will be here for that. You can check out Andrew's 53-man roster projection at InsideTheBirds.com. And don't forget the Inside the Birds podcast on all podcasting platforms. Geoff Mosher, we'll see you Wednesday.
All right, my friend. Be
All right,
good.
he's back Wednesday to take a look at that 53-man roster. And he, of course, joined us here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.